Thank you for joining today's briefing on the city's response to gun violence in Philadelphia. Please remember we have limited time for these briefings, so only one representative from each outlet is permitted to ask questions after the presentations today. I will turn it over to Mayor for opening remarks.
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, last year we awarded 31 local organizations more than $13.5 million to expand their anti-violence work on the ground in our most impacted communities. To achieve and sustain a reduction in gun violence and improve the quality of life in communities most affected by gun violence, the city is investing in organizations with proven track records of delivering quality anti-violence interventions to help them expand and strengthen their efforts. In today's update, we'll share more information about the 31 grantees selected through the city's anti-violence community expansion program and how we are helping them to scale up and build capacity. This work often takes place behind the scenes, but it couldn't be more important to our success. Without this critical support, many of these smaller or mid-sized organizations don't have the bandwidth to properly administer programming on a scale that we require to help us drive down violence in our communities. On that front, we've engaged two partner organizations, Equal Measure and Scattergood Foundation, to help all 31 grantees with capacity building and technical assistance. And joining us today are Leon Andrews, Executive Director of Equal Measure, and Samantha Matlin, VP of Learning and Community Impact at the Scattergood Foundation, both of whom you'll hear from more. But first, I'll turn it over to Erica Atwood, Senior Director, Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety, for more about this process, including how we're moving forward with the Community Expansion Grant Program and how it fits into our larger strategy in 2022 and beyond. Erica?
Thank you, Mayor Kenny, and good afternoon, everyone. When we launched the community expansion grants in fall of last year, we understood that while this is a first-time grant, we really have to look forward and really understand how we're measuring not effort, but impact in communities that are the most vulnerable to gun violence. And as a part of that effort, we wanted to also not only invest directly into community organizations, but as the mayor mentioned, invest in how we're measuring the impact that these organizations made, and how are we strengthening them so they can broaden the opportunities for the communities that they serve. With that, we went through what was somewhat of an arduous process in a short timeline, and we were able to solidify partnerships with two providers for evaluation and technical assistance. Our lead provider with evaluation is Equal Measure. Equal Measure will be working with two partners that have a relationship with Philadelphia, as well as a relationship with community-based and community-serving organizations. And this partnership with Equal Measure includes Research for Action and Cities United. For technical assistance, we've partnered with Scattergood, and Scattergood will develop a team that will be providing hands-on support for our grantees to be able to measure what they're doing, to fill some gaps, to strengthen those organizations, to help them tell their stories better. There are numerous ways we're doing this, but I want to set that context and then pass it off to the leaders of these projects with us. First will be Leon Andrews from Equal Measure. Leon?
Thanks, Erica. And thank you, Mayor Kenny and Erica's team for inviting me to speak today on behalf of our forthcoming evaluation of the Anti-Violence Community Partnership Grant Program. As you heard from Erica, Equal Measure is partnering with Research for Action, Evident Change, and Cities United. And we are honored to have this opportunity to work with the city and the community to prevent and reduce violence and to help dismantle the drivers of violence, such as structural racism, disproportionate contact with the justice system, incarceration, unemployment, and poverty. Equal Measure and Research for Action are both based here in Philadelphia and bring over 3 decades of experience working in communities across the city. Prior to joining Equal Measure 8 months ago, as president and CEO, I spent 15 years at the National League of Cities, leading our youth development and racial justice work. I had the privilege to work with the past 3 mayoral administrations in this city and members of city council over the years on several issues, including its focus on violence prevention. Our evaluation team brings a depth and breadth of experience in mixed methods research, in public policy change, in community gun violence prevention and public safety, all with a focus on making communities stronger, healthier, and more equitable. The aim of our evaluation is to help the city understand which anti-violence community partnership grant-funded programs and interventions are effectively reaching individuals who are highly at risk for engaging in gun violence and advancing the city's efforts to reduce gun violence. Our collective work in this 14-month partnership will focus on 2 work streams: a comprehensive evaluation of the 31 CEG grantees and an assessment that examines the TCIG administrative processes. For the CEG evaluation, we will address critical questions such as, is the funded program reaching its intended audience? What are the outcomes of the funded programs that are aligned with CEG goals? Which organizations and programs have the greatest potential to impact the gun violence crisis? And how can Black and Brown-led programs be best supported to serve Black and Brown communities most effectively? We will begin our work by identifying evidence-based models that are shown to support reductions in gun violence and are aligned with each of the CEG-funded program models. We will also identify outcomes that lead to a reduction in exposure for gun violence among participants. This will set the stage for developing and refining the outcomes we will evaluate, which will guide our work throughout the entire process. And finally, we will work with CEG grantees to define how outcomes will be measured. This will involve activities such as developing data collection tools, surveys, focus groups, and interviews. We will develop evaluation reports for each of the grantees and a comprehensive CEG report of all of the individual reports, which we hope to be able to share with the public. Again, on behalf of my colleagues at Equal Measure and our partners at Research for Action, Evident Change, and Cities United, we want to thank again Mayor Kenny, Erica, her team, and the City of Philadelphia for engaging us in this critically important work. We are also thrilled to work with the Scattergood Foundation, which will serve as the city's technical assistance and capacity building vendor on this initiative. And it's my pleasure to introduce Samantha Matlin, who will bring brief remarks on behalf of Scattergood. Samantha?
Thanks, Leon, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Kenny and Erica and your team for welcoming us into this really critical work. At the Scattergood Foundation, we have been doing capacity building around evaluation and impact for the last decade. And we think it's really critical to meet organizations and communities where they are to build off the good work that they're doing to strengthen it. So our role in this initiative will be that it will be working directly with the organizations to see where they're at and help them augment and increase their impact. We recognize that all nonprofits in our great region work really hard, and our job is to help make sure that we understand what we are doing as an organization, how well we're doing it, and what difference it makes. And really importantly, what difference does it make for whom? We know not all participants gain in outcomes the same way, and it's really important that we look at disparities and focus on equity in this work. We'll be accomplishing this work with an amazing team of colleagues from here locally, as well as from Yale and Morgan Clark University. And we'll be focusing on some of the drivers that Leon mentioned around educational attainment and access and employment, and the structural barriers that lead us to all lead healthy and optimal lives in our communities, because we know that gun violence is really part of a bigger picture and we can't look at it in isolation. I also want to say that we recognize at the Scattergood Foundation that we can't program our way out of this issue. We have to have effective programs, but we also have to have effective policies and practices that go beyond what a nonprofit can do. And that's why we're so excited that this partnership includes, of course, the city and includes criminal justice and policy work, because all of us are going to need to be part of this to make an impact. So we'll be working directly, as I said, with these organizations. We'll be doing group learning and trainings, as well as individual consultation and coaching with these organizations. And we're so excited to be learning off the work that we've previously done and continue to build off of that. And we'll really be starting off with these organizations, helping them articulate exactly why they do what they do and what difference it makes. As you know, from the 31 organizations, there's lots of ways to work on reducing gun violence. And so we want to really explore, why do they do what they do and what difference do they think it makes? So we're excited to launch this work and partner with you all. It's so exciting to see everyone's interest in this really critical public health issue facing our city. And again, I just want to say on behalf of the Scattergood Foundation and our colleagues, we're so excited to take part of this. We're really excited to work with Equal Measure, who we've been working with these past few years, and excited to continue that collaboration. So just want to say thank you again to the city, Mayor Kenny and Erica and your team. And with that, Erica, I think I turn it back to you.
Yes, and with that, I'll hand it to Commissioner Outlaw. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Over the last several weeks, we've seen a continuation of some of the same troubling trends that we saw in 2021, with overall increases in homicides, in shootings, and carjackings. Again, I want to make something very, very clear, crystal clear. There's nothing more important to myself or to the members of this police department than fighting the surge of violent crime that continues to plague our city. It's beyond unacceptable. It's entirely unacceptable. And this department remains laser focused on stemming the tide of violence that we've been seeing. I might even sound like a broken record, and that's fine. But the reality is, far too many in our city think that it's open season to commit crime here in Philadelphia. And those people need to know that if they break the law, we will not rest until they're taken into custody. That said, the unfortunate truth is that our crime problems won't go away with the turn of a calendar page. These increases in crime didn't begin in 2021 or 2020. In fact, these are issues that we've been seeing grow and continue to grow over the years preceding these last 2 years. As of this morning, the city has seen 32 homicides since the start of the new year, 32. And this is an increase of 19% compared to the same time last year. We've also had 114 shootings so far this year, which is an increase of 25% over our numbers in the previous year. So far this year, we've also experienced over 100 carjackings, including attempts. As I've stated on several occasions, the rising numbers are beyond troubling, especially given that during the winter months, we generally would tend to see a decrease in the number of crimes committed. But unfortunately, over the last few years, we haven't seen these lulls in crime. Despite these numbers, the Philadelphia Police Department is working diligently to address these issues. And as I've reported prior, we're adjusting to the way we do things in the department to meet the needs of the community and to get ahead of these troubling crime numbers. Late last year, we discussed the creation of a non-fatal shooting unit, and we fully expect this unit to be fully functional within the next few weeks. The side-by-side work of our homicide detectives and then the non-fatal shooting unit detectives will increase lines of communication and information sharing, which is crucial to getting ahead of our shootings and homicides. Last year, we also bolstered the number of detectives assigned to the homicide unit. We hope to promote more detectives in the upcoming weeks. And given that the caseloads are high, we want to make sure that we're not burning our detectives out, that we're alleviating their caseloads as much as possible, and that we're providing the appropriate resources to them. As Deputy Commissioner Dales, who's our Deputy Commissioner over Patrol, will discuss in a few minutes, we continue to deploy officers to our pinpoint locations, areas where we know the data shows us that our most problematic areas exist and where our most problematic individuals or groups also exist. Our officers continue to proactively patrol these zones and confiscate crime guns. In fact, just this weekend, officers arrested 17 individuals for the violation of the Uniform Firearms Act, which is VUFA. 17. Year to date, our officers have made 83 VUFA arrests. That equates to roughly 4.5 individuals arrested for firearm violations every day. 4.5 individuals a day. One gun, one shooter off the street chips away at the heartbreak that our residents have been subjected to over the last several years. And I say that because some of you might say, well, what is that doing considering all of the bodies that we're seeing dropping here in the city? But again, one gun, one shooter. The other issue that Philadelphia has been experiencing has been a dramatic increase in carjackings. Last week, myself and several members of the PPD were on hand to discuss carjackings in the city. From 2010 to 2019, carjackings within the city remained relatively flat, with Philadelphia averaging about 230 carjackings per year. In 2020, that number jumped up to 409. And last year, we saw 757 carjackings in the city. These numbers have almost tripled since 2019. And as we've seen, these carjackings can result in serious injuries, even death. We don't want to see our community members get hurt if they encounter a carjacker. So the PPD has provided tips to follow to avoid being a victim of a carjacking. And I'm going to share them again here. First, be mindful of where and when carjackers are likely to attempt a carjacking. This includes times when you're getting in and out of your vehicle and driveways and in parking lots. Be mindful of your surroundings when fueling your car, at ATMs, and in streets that have poor lighting. Also, we know carjackers have been utilizing a bump and run technique where the perpetrators initiate the carjacking by tapping your vehicle with their vehicle. If you're involved in a minor traffic accident, you can do several things. First, take note of your surroundings. If the area is desolate or has poor lighting, please proceed to the nearest location that is less solitary or has better lighting. You can also dial 911 and inform them of what's going on. They will send officers to your location there. You can also drive to the nearest police station if circumstances allow. It's also important that our delivery drivers be aware of the increase in these carjackings that we're seeing. Utilize the same tips when conducting your deliveries. Be aware of your surroundings, suspicious persons or vehicles, and trust your instincts. I encourage all drivers to keep their phones on their person in case an emergency arises. And please, please do not get involved in an altercation with these suspects. Your life is far more important than your vehicle. So be a good witness. Pay attention to what the carjacker or carjackers are wearing, even what they say, and any other vehicles possibly involved if you can. There are more tips available on our social media, so please check it out at Philly Police on Twitter and Instagram, and facebook.com/Philly Police to see them or to see more. But again, please, I can't stress enough, be a good witness. Details are important and they can help police identify those responsible and then allow us to apprehend them. While I'm on the subject of apprehending individuals, the PPD has redistributed its resources to addressing this problem. In fact, just the other day, our officers were in the area of 200 North Ruby when they were flagged down by our carjacking victim. To make a long story short, they were able to recover the victim's vehicle and apprehend several of the individuals responsible. We also believe that these individuals were wanted for another carjacking that took place a few days ago at the same location. So thankfully, these victims were not physically harmed, but obviously these incidents were frightening for the victims. And we believe that we have people in custody that are responsible for more than one incident. On the investigative end, every one of our PPD detective divisions and our major crimes unit has assigned detectives to investigate patterns, hotspots, and develop intelligence as it relates to these carjackings. Our intelligence bureau is also gathering information from multiple sources and working with our law enforcement partners to identify locations, trends, patterns, anything that we know of associated with these carjackings. The Attorney General's office also has been working closely with the PPD and lending investigative technology to our department to help strengthen our investigations. I ask anyone who has information on any crime, not just carjackings, to call or text our tip line at 215-686-TIPS or 215-686-8477 or dial 911. I know that was a lot to cover, but I want to make sure that we hit these tips home and more importantly than anything else, how seriously we are addressing this uptick in violent crime. Now to talk about what's happening in our pinpoint grids is Deputy Commissioner Dales, who's our Deputy Commissioner of Patrol. DC Dales.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you pull up the slides, please? All right. There you go. Okay. Next slide. All right, I will start with the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats. Looking at the top of the chart, year to date as of January 16th of this year, Philadelphia had 27 homicides and 114 shooting victims. In comparison to last year, homicides are up 23%, 27 this year versus 22 this year. And again, this is as of January 16th. The commissioner mentioned as of yesterday, we were at 32 homicides, which puts us at 19% increase in comparison to last year. But again, I'm focusing on this period, so I don't want you to get confused. So in comparison to last year, homicides, which I mentioned, are up 23%, 27 versus 22, and shooting victims up are 25% by 114 versus 91. Now, if you look at 2022 versus 2020, it shows that we are up 4%, 27 this year versus 26 in 2020. And looking at the bottom left of the chart, it shows the motives for the homicides. The top three, again, are arguments, domestics, and drugs. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the citywide homicide and shooting victim stats 2-week comparison. From January 3rd to January 16th, we had 25 homicides, 90 shooting victims, which include homicides and multiple shooting victims, and 77 shooting occurrences. When comparing the current 2-week period from January 3rd of this year to January 16th of this year as well, with the previous 2-week period from December 20th to December 20th of 2021 to January 2nd of 2022, it shows homicides up 4%, shooting victims down 16%, and shooting occurrences down 4%. Next slide, please. This slide shows the comparison between citywide homicides and homicides that occurred in the pinpoint grids. So if you look at the top chart, it shows citywide homicides up 23%. Looking at the bottom chart, it shows homicides in the pinpoint grids up 100%. So that's 12 homicides in our pinpoint grids this year versus 6 last year. So again, it's still early in the year to determine where we are in reference to the trends within these pinpoint grids for the year. So just want to make sure I put that out there. So it may seem high, but this will fluctuate within the first 3 months. I'm sure of that. Next slide, please. This slide shows the comparison between citywide shooting victims and shooting victims in the pinpoint grids. Citywide shooting victims are up 25% and the pinpoint grids are up 12%. 46 this year versus 41 last year. Oh, go back, please. 46 this year versus 41 last year. Thank you. You can go to the next slide. All right, this slide shows the year in total VUF arrests for 2018 through 2021, and the total VUF arrests year to date for 2022 from January 1st to January 16th of this year. In 2021, we reached an all-time high in VUF arrests that totaled 2,541. And so far this year, we have 83 VUF arrests. This time last year, we had 159 VUF arrests and 68 VUF arrests in 2020, which shows an increase in VUF arrests by 22% when comparing 2022 year-to-date total with 2020, and a decrease in VUF arrests by 48% when comparing 2022 with 2021. Next slide, please. In 2021, we recovered 509 crime guns by the end of January. So if you look at that chart where it says 2021 at the bottom, and the bottom of the bar highlighted in orange at 509, that's the total amount of crime guns recovered by the end of January. So far we're in the middle of January now, and we're at 226 crime guns that we recovered so far. Next slide, please. And lastly, year to date, 2021 properly made firearms, also known as ghost guns, were recovered in our city. So as you can see, we're at 21. Again, it's still early in the year. There are a lot of ghost guns out there on the streets. We know that, we see that. And as you can see, each year it keeps rising. So hopefully that number will go down in 2022. But in reality, the ghost guns are out there. So with that, I will now pass it over to Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Investigations, and he will speak about cases we wish to highlight.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales. Good afternoon, everyone. First, today I'm going to be providing arrest updates as I normally do during these press conferences. And since our last press conference, Philadelphia police have arrested 12 individuals who are wanted for committing homicides. In addition, I'm also going to be featuring a fugitive that's wanted for a recent homicide and highlighting a video from a non-fatal shooting that occurred over the weekend in our East Division. And then finally, as the commissioner touched on extensively, I'm going to be touching on the rash of carjackings that we've been experiencing this year. So these upcoming slides are of the individuals recently arrested for homicides. And I'll be listing the incidents chronologically from the date of occurrence, from the earliest or the oldest to the most recent in 2022. The first slide is Anthony Williams. On January 17th, 30-year-old Anthony Williams was arrested for the murder of 27-year-old Shalaya Davis, who was 5 months pregnant, for an incident that occurred on July 16th of 2020 on the 2500 block of Berks Street. The case was previously cleared when Christopher Reed was arrested on January 14th of 2021 for the same case. The next slide is a picture of Mr. Roberson. Make sure, yes, Hanif Roberson. And as probably everyone on this call will recall, on January, well, this is an incident that occurred with a 14-year-old. The arrest happened on January the 10th, and 20-year-old Hanif Roberson was taken into custody in Oakwood, Georgia. He is there awaiting extradition to Philadelphia to face charges for the murder of 14-year-old Samir Jefferson for an incident that occurred on November the 29th on the 100 block of West Wyoming Avenue. This case had already been previously cleared with the arrest of Quadir Johnson and Kyer Garnett on December 1st. That was right after the incident had occurred. This next slide is John Nuslin. And on January the 14th, 18-year-old John Nuslin was arrested for the murder of 70-year-old Chun Chin that occurred on December the 2nd of 2021 on the 3000 block of Teasdale Street. The victim of this murder was beaten to death during a carjacking that was committed by Mr. Nuslin and several other males. Other males believed to be juveniles. This male is an adult. Investigators are working very hard to identify all the other males and obtain warrants for the other males that are involved in this horrible murder. The suspects are also believed to be responsible for additional carjackings. And this case specifically goes to show that even if the offenders don't have a gun during the carjacking, the result can still be deadly. Excuse me. The next slide is of Leslie Ayala. On January the 14th, 33-year-old Leslie Ayala was arrested for the murder of 32-year-old John Barber on December the 7th of 2021 in the 1800 block of East Lippincott Street. The motive for this homicide is apparently over a drug dispute or drug territory. The picture you have there is of Darren Morrison. And last night, on January the 18th, 55-year-old Darren Morrison was arrested for the shooting murder of his brother, 68-year-old Paul Blackwell, for an incident that occurred on December the 16th on the 3800 block of Brown Street. And obviously, this is a domestic incident. Next slide is Jaleel Jones. On January the 4th, 27-year-old Jaleel Jones was arrested in Lawrenceville, Georgia, after a series of events where Jones led police on a high-speed chase, causing several vehicle accidents. Jaleel Jones is wanted for the double murder of 32-year-old Tyreek Smith and 42-year-old Kareem Bryant for an incident that occurred on December the 28th of 2021 outside of Club Risque on the 5900 block of Tacony Street. This incident appears to have stemmed from an argument and a fight that broke out as a result. Mr. Jones is in custody and awaiting extradition, and I want to add that in the case of Mr. Jones, we got extensive coverage of the video that was put out by our homicide unit. We got a lot of tips, and we're grateful for that help. Okay, thank you. Now you go to the next one. We have photos of Kuma Anderson and Raymond Robinson. And on January 5th, 36-year-old Kuma Anderson and 37-year-old Raymond Robinson were arrested for the murder of 35-year-old Tessina Jennings and shooting Miss Jennings' son, a 17-year-old who survived. The incident occurred on January the 2nd on the 900 block of McGee Avenue. This incident also appears to have been domestic related. Next are the arrest photos of Samir Turner and Haishina Burwell. On January the 8th, 15-year-old Samir Turner and 16-year-old Haishina Burwell were arrested for the murder of 39-year-old Jerwayne Hunter for an incident that occurred on January the 3rd on the 2200 block of North Broad Street. Samir Turner and Haishina Burwell were attempting to rob the victim. When he tried to stop them, Samir Turner shot Jerwayne Hunter multiple times, killing him. And I would also add in on, if we go back to the slide of Mr. Turner and Miss Burwell, that they're also suspects in a carjacking, as we've been talking about carjackings. Okay, go to the next slide. This is Walter Hurd Jr. And on January the 13th, 30-year-old Walter Hurd Jr. was arrested for the murder of 78-year-old Stanley Lawton for an incident that occurred on January 5th of this year in the 1700 block of West Allegheny Avenue. The motive for this homicide remains unclear at this time. The next slide is Sylvester Leggett. On January 17th, just this past weekend, 33-year-old Keith, who's also known as Sylvester Leggett, was arrested for the murder of 31-year-old Marcus Jackson earlier the same day on the 2800 block of South 80th Street. And this arrest was very significant because there was an officer that was working in plain clothes who in fact witnessed the homicide and pursued the offender before the offender crashed his vehicle. The plainclothes officer, along with other uniformed officers, apprehended the suspect just a short distance from the scene of the homicide and took him into custody. Now I'm going to be featuring some suspects who are wanted for homicides that have occurred within the last month. And again, as always, we're asking for the public's assistance in locating these individuals. This is a photo of Joseph Wayne. 23-year-old Joseph Wayne is wanted for the murder of 29-year-old Willie Walker for an incident that occurred on December the 3rd on the 1700 block of West Passyunk Avenue. And the motive for the homicide is believed to be an argument. Anyone with information is urged to call our tip line, 686-TIPS or 8477. And now I'm going to speak about an incident that captured the attention of the entire city and the entire region. It's the homicide that occurred in the 6100 block of Palmetto. And there was a video that was just released 2 days ago on the YouTube channel. I don't have the video at this time, but it is available. It involves the homicide of the 32-year-old female on Saturday, November the 20th. It happened at approximately 8:35, the 6100 block of Palmetto Street. The victim was returning from her baby shower when she was shot and killed in a targeted attack. The victim was 7 months pregnant. Her unborn child was also killed in the attack. And the video that is available on the YouTube channel features a vehicle that we are very much trying to locate. We're hoping that someone will see the video and recognize it's a Cadillac DeVille, recognize the vehicle and provide some information. We definitely very much want to get more information and bring that incident and obtain an arrest on that case. Next, we have a video of over the weekend that was a shooting that happened in our East Division, and we are looking for the public's help. This one hasn't been released yet, so this is the first time we're showing this one. There, as you'll see from this video, there is a male suspect who is going to enter the store on the 600 block of West Clearfield Street. He's going to be inside of there, interacting with the clerk, making a purchase. There's pretty good images of this individual. This is our suspect making the purchase. He's wearing a gray and black winter coat, a black knit hat that has white writing, gray pants that has a stripe down the sides. He's also got gray and blue sneakers on. As he's leaving the store, he's immediately going to see another male that's going to walk in. He's going to assault that male immediately, begin to punch him. And as he steps outside, he's going to pull out a firearm. He's going to pistol whip the victim, and fire a shot. That victim was shot once in the abdomen. He's in critical but stable condition at this time. And we're hopeful that someone will have information that will identify this individual in this crime that happened over the weekend. And that's just about the end of it. And now, as the commissioner indicated, I want to talk about some of the recent arrests and the problem we're having, this issue with the carjackings. As everyone on this call is aware, we've seen a significant uptick in the number of carjackings so far this year, even over the uptick from last year. As the commissioner indicated, all the steps, we're doing everything we can to prevent these events from happening. But as noted, we can't be everywhere. But in this past week, we have arrested 3 juveniles for carjackings, and I want to highlight those. There will be no photos shown, and I won't be showing photos of our carjacking suspects because we're still working on these cases, and we don't want those photos to be released because they could prejudice the pending cases that we have individuals suspected of committing. On January 13th, officers responded to a report of a shooting as well as a report of an attempted robbery in the 6500 block of Cherokee Street. When the officers arrived and spoke to a complainant, informed him he was approached by 2 males. One produced a handgun, demanded the complainant's keys. Complainant retrieved a firearm that he was legally carrying. He fired at the offender in self-defense. One offender and the offender at that time was shooting at the complainant. The offender fell to the ground. The complainant disarmed him. That offender managed to escape from the scene, while other officers were directed to another area where they encountered a 16-year-old male suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. The complainant from the carjacking attempt positively identified the suspect who was shot as the male that attempted to rob him and had shot at him moments earlier. A gun was recovered from the scene where the complainant disarmed the suspect. That was a 9mm Glock. And the offender was arrested, and he's in the process. He's being charged with aggravated assault, robbery, carjacking, and VUFA. He is still in the hospital in stable condition, and we're awaiting his release so he can be processed. And this next slide is for the discussion of what happened on 200 North Ruby Street. The police commissioner made a note of that in her opening remarks. The incident occurred on January the 14th. Officers responded to a report of a robbery, the 200 block of North Ruby Street. When they encountered the complainant, he indicated he was making a food delivery. 4 unknown males approached him. 3 of the males were armed with handguns, took the complainant's phone, got into his vehicle, fled from the location. Responding officers put out flash information of the vehicle over radio, and officers in the area observed the vehicle, began to follow it. Several males fled from the vehicle when it stopped. The officers observed a male next to the driver's side of the vehicle drop a black and silver handgun, and we arrested 17-year-old male after a brief foot pursuit. The handgun that was recovered, as Deputy Dales has indicated, we see a lot of, is what's known as a ghost gun or a privately made firearm. It was a 9mm handgun loaded with 26 live rounds. Other responding officers stopped a second male, and after securing that second male, who was 15 years old, recovered a silver and black Smith & Wesson .40 caliber handgun that was loaded with 24 live rounds from the waistband. That male was positively identified as one of the offenders, and we have indication that he's the one that initiated it. As previously indicated by the commissioner, please stay vigilant, be aware of your surroundings. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kevin at the mayor's office.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And with that, we'll now move to Q&A for members of the press. Because of limited time, only one representative from each media outlet is permitted to ask questions. Reporters are asked to limit their questions to 2 or fewer. And today, given the time and the hard deadline of 2 o'clock that we have today, we are limiting topics to questions related to the presentations today. Armando is available for Spanish interpretation as needed. If you would like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand function under reactions. So with that, I'll move to Kristen Johansson of KYW.
Hello. My first question is there, with the carjackings, does it seem like there's some sort of pattern, whether it be by the victims or by maybe the luxury cars that they're targeting?
I'll touch on that. And unfortunately, the answer is basically no. They are targeting anything that in the case of the attempted carjacking that happened on Cherokee that I spoke about, that was an older model Pontiac. Pontiacs haven't been made for years. The offender was found inside of a newer model Jeep Wrangler. So I can't go to the mind of why they're targeting different cars. Our sense is that oftentimes it's an opportunity in number of the deliveries, the delivery attempts or completed carjackings. We believe that they've set those those food deliveries up, and whatever that person arrives in, that's the car they're going to take. We also know that it's not just limited to any particular car or high-end or not high-end car. So it is the full gamut of vehicles, Kristen.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. The second part of that is when it comes to people who have guns who are maybe, I talked to somebody who had a gun at the time, and in that quick moment of thought when he was being carjacked or attempted a carjacking, he decided not to pull out his gun, even though a gun was in his face. I hate to ask this question this way, but what are you kind of recommending in that moment if somebody is legally carrying?
I'll jump in on that one. I've stated before, my issue isn't with people that are legally carrying firearms. Those folks tend to know what the rules are. They know what the laws are. And whether or not they choose to engage when they are legally carrying a firearm is up to them. So we're not in the business of offering advice as to when and when not to use it, because obviously you have to make a personal decision when you're making the choice to apply for a gun permit in the first place and then to purchase legally this firearm. Our concern rests amongst those who are illegally carrying firearms here and using those, because typically those outcomes, they don't end up well. They're not surrounded by legal circumstances. And again, these aren't folks that go and practice with their gun. They don't know what the laws are. They're not carrying them legally. So again, our focus more so on those who are legally carrying, and those who are legally carrying firearms, they have to make the conscious decision to utilize it in the best way that they believe at that time when they make the decision to shoot.
And my last question is just kind of procedural, but is there a centralized place that everybody is looking for kind of the number of guns that are coming in from maybe the ATF, the PPD cases? Like, is there one centralized place you all are looking at? I just am only asking that because, you guys will release numbers, then somebody else will release numbers, and it just seems kind of everywhere.
Well, I can comment. All the firearms that we recover in the city go through a trace process that is overseen by the ATF and the state. So if it has a serial number, it's entered in there. If it doesn't have a serial number because it's a privately made firearm or a ghost gun, we track it, we test fire it, and we keep a record of it. So we have all of the guns, as Deputy Dales indicated in his slide about the crime guns that are recovered. That's in that number. And we have records of all of those guns that have been confiscated throughout the year.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. With that, we'll go to Isabel Sanchez of Telemundo 62. Isabel?
Armando, como comenzamos, mi primera pregunta es sobre los carjackings. Importante para nuestra audiencia.
Hey, Isabel, it sounds like your connection's a little off. We'll give you a couple minutes to figure that out. I don't know if you can hear us.
Porque hemos visto una tendencia no solo del aumento de los carjackings, sino de las víctimas. I do hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, your audio was a little in and out.
I apologize. De nuevo, Armando, la pregunta ya la sabes.
Sí, por supuesto. Gracias, Isabel. The question is, what efforts are being made in order to respond to carjackings? We have seen lately that many victims are responding by shooting their perpetrators. Do you see this response as a trend or trending?
So the response to the carjackings, the commissioner outlined from the department standpoint, increased patrols in any areas that we've seen the problem being happening. We are taking investigative steps. We're working with our federal partners. We're processing the cars. We're tracking the offenders. We're tracking the cases. So we're taking a significant amount of steps. But at the end of the day, as the commissioner indicated, as we've been talking about it, this is a national problem that's happening everywhere. It's spilling out into the suburbs in this region. There was an attempt out in Abington this past weekend. So I think that the best answer I have is for everybody who's driving a vehicle to be aware of their surroundings, think about the possibility and what they might do, whether it is have their phone handy to call 911. We've provided information about the different scenarios. The delivery drivers have to be very aware that what can happen. There are a number of scenarios where they could be targeted for carjackings. And people, when they're parking their car, they should look around. If they don't feel safe, drive to a safe, well-lit area. Try not to park your car in a dark area. And keep your phone on you at all times so that if you do get carjacked, you'll have an opportunity to call the police.
La respuesta que nos da la ciudad es que, por supuesto, estamos presentando un esfuerzo coordinado para responder a estos asaltos para robo de vehículos. Hemos incrementado el número de patrullas y estamos viendo que el problema sucede y estamos para eso tomando pasos en la investigación conjuntamente con nuestros socios a nivel federal. Estamos haciendo un seguimiento de los automóviles que han participado, que se han robado y estamos tomando pasos prudentes, pero al fin del día, como dijo la comisionada anteriormente, este es un problema nacional y vemos que se está expandiendo incluso a los suburbios en nuestra región. Ha habido un intento este fin de semana de hacer un asalto para robo de vehículo en Abington. Y lo que tienen que hacer todos los choferes es sencillamente manejar con cautela, teniendo en cuenta dónde están y cómo poder responder en caso de sucederse una de estas situaciones. Pueden llamar al 911. Hay diferentes escenarios que pueden de alguna manera anticipar en la mente. Le pedimos específicamente a la gente que hace entregas de comida o entregas a domicilio que tengan una coordinada. Y obviamente a las personas que están estacionando su coche, que miren alrededor, que traten de encontrar un lugar bien iluminado y seguro, que no esté muy oscuro y por supuesto que tengan su teléfono disponible en caso de que sucediera algo. Gracias.
Gracias a ti, Armando. Mi segunda pregunta sería poder tener en español lo que mencionó la comisionada acerca de lo importante que es para su departamento priorizar y bajar la tendencia que vemos de aumento en los crímenes violentos en la ciudad, por favor.
This is a request for Commissioner Outlaw, as you pointed out in your remarks earlier in English, but for the benefit of our Spanish-speaking audience, if you could explain a little bit about the city's response in terms of violent crime and what you're doing, what's being done in order to lower those numbers.
Certainly. And, I will continue to say this until I'm blue in the face. So I appreciate you asking the question. There's a lot of things that we recognize we had to do differently, moving forward into 2022. And as we look back in 2021, the most obvious thing is our staffing just isn't what it was a year ago, 2 years ago, let alone 5-10 years ago. And then you add, what we'd seen throughout the holidays with Omicron outbreaks. So we immediately pulled individuals from plainclothes units or specialized units and put them back into patrol to assist us with not only just being available to answer calls for service, but to ensure that we had high visibility in areas that we know are problematic in the city. I'm also anticipating in the upcoming weeks, maybe by the end of February, to promote more detectives. And I believe that that's going to not only assist with lessening or lightening the caseload of our detectives so we can help prevent burnout, because, we had the same amount of detectives, with the exception of, me adding more bodies to homicide upon my arrival here. We really didn't increase our capacity in all of the other investigative units. So hoping to promote more detectives to reduce their caseloads, but then to also help bolster our efforts around the non-fatal shootings. We recognize that our clearance rates are low. Homicide investigations get a lot of attention. They're centralized, they're focused. There's a direct line of communication to the DA's office. And so by creating this non-fatal shooting team doing the same thing, we are making sure that the non-fatal shootings get the same amount of attention and technology and resource centralization that the homicides do as well. We're hoping that intentional focus would help improve our clearance rates there. And we know if we improve our clearance rates, it serves as a deterrent, but then also lets people know that there's consequences, which also serves as a deterrent there. So I think that's very, very important. So in addition to that, again, we have a class coming out in the spring. We're hiring more people. So we're hoping to address our staffing shortage by continuing to bolster our recruitment efforts, the bodies that will get on the ground, shifting resources from our specialized units to patrol, bolstering our detective units, utilizing technology in different ways, and that's DNA analysis as well when it comes to how we collect evidence and how we process that evidence. And then lastly, I would say too, again, we're going hard as best as we can with social media and making sure that we are in real time as best possible, working with our real-time crime center to monitor what's going on social media, and then also what's going on real time with the cameras that we have there on the street so we can dispatch officers in real time. So there's a lot of things in the works, but again, a lot of it is resource intensive, and we're really having to shift how we police with the same amount of resources that we have. So it's really calling for us to be not only innovative, but just hunkering down with what we have and adapting to the way crime is adapting here in our city.
Thank you, Commissioner Outlaw. Lo que nos dice la comisionada Isabel es que obviamente nosotros estamos teniendo problemas y queremos reducir esos números de los crímenes que nos están atacando en la ciudad. Y yo voy a continuar diciendo esto, aunque me canse. Aprecio realmente que hayas hecho esta pregunta porque estamos tratando de hacer las cosas diferentemente el 2022 con lo que aprendimos el 2021. Tenemos problemas en cuanto al número de personal disponible, que no es el mismo que teníamos hace 1 año, 2 años, 5 o 10 años atrás. Nosotros hemos visto también que durante las fiestas dicembrinas ha habido problemas por el surgimiento del virus del Omicron. Y lo que estamos haciendo, entre otras cosas, es tomar a los oficiales que van encubiertos y que vayan nuevamente a hacer patrullaje. Estamos tomando oficiales que están en unidades especializadas para incrementar la presencia policial y responder a las llamadas, para dar una mayor visibilidad a la presencia policial en la ciudad y resolver estos problemas de una forma más efectiva. También estamos anticipando que para finales de febrero vamos a darle la graduación a una nueva clase de oficiales y nosotros vamos a tratar de reducir la carga que tienen los detectives, que algunos se sienten muy cansados, y vamos a tratar de incrementar la presencia con miembros de la policía de la División de Homicidios para lograr una capacidad menor y puedan resolver sus casos. Sabemos también de que hay un incremento con los tiroteos que no llevan a muertes, que no son fatales, y los resultados de nuestras investigaciones no son los que deseáramos, pero vamos a darle mayor importancia y mayor atención. Tenemos una cooperación con la Oficina de la Fiscalía para desarrollar un equipo de respuesta, y justamente al darle mayor atención, mayor tecnología, recursos, vamos a esperar que nuestras tasas de resolución sean mejores. Tenemos también la presencia policial que sirve como un impedimento y para que la gente vea que hay consecuencias a estos hechos. Si a eso le agregamos que tenemos una clase que estamos dando en la primavera, vamos a poder resolver la falta de oficiales y vamos también a mejorar nuestros esfuerzos para reclutar más candidatos para la Academia de Policía. Si además le agregamos el uso de la tecnología y el análisis y recolección de datos de ADN, este proceso más la colaboración que tenemos con los medios sociales, las redes, donde vemos en tiempo real en nuestro centro para combatir la criminalidad, qué es lo que está sucediendo, y también la información que nos dan nuestras cámaras en las calles, podemos desplegar nuestros esfuerzos. Y para terminar, este es un esfuerzo continuo, como he dicho, voy a seguir hablándolo y diciéndolo, es una respuesta intensa que estamos dando en la policía y vamos a continuar haciéndolo. Gracias.
Thank you, Armando. Thank you, Isabel. And we have time for one more question and one more reporter. So Alicia Reed from CBS.
Thanks so much for taking my question. This is for Deputy Commissioner Naish. You had mentioned recovering ghost guns during at least one of the carjacking arrests. Do you have a total number of ghost guns that have been recovered so far this year? I'm not sure if I missed that.
It's on the slide. Joel, do you have I don't have the number in front of me.
Trying to get my video up. Hold on. We up to 21. There it is. 21 ghost guns for the year.
Well, how many last year?
Last year, we ended the year at 571.
Yeah.
And the year prior to that, 250. The year prior to that, 95. So as you can see, there's an increase in ghost guns being confiscated from our streets.
And in states like New York, you're not allowed to sell them. California.
Yeah, I know San Diego, they have a city ordinance in place. San Diego is one. And I believe it's another part of California, like you mentioned. I forgot which, but I think it's Los Angeles, exactly. Los Angeles, California, and San Diego. They actually have an ordinance in place where you're not allowed to sell, possess. Well, of course, possessing the ghost guns is illegal, but you can't sell or make ghost guns within that city or be in possession of the.
One of the things I would suggest is to take a look at the requirements to buy a gun in New York State and in New York City, which is a separate set of gun laws, and also look at what you have to go through to buy a gun in California. Not just to carry a gun concealed, but to buy a gun, own it, and possess it is multiple layers of obstacles that those states and the city of New York put people through. Of course, you can't straw purchase in any of those places, and that's one of our biggest problems.
Alicia, are you all set?
I have just one more question really quickly for Mayor Kenny. Mayor Kenny, Senator Jake Corman is pushing for Larry Krasner's impeachment. Do you have any comment on that?
I've been a friend of Jake Corman's for over 30 years. I like him very much. He's been very helpful to the city in a number of different areas. He went to Temple University and we're friends. I think he's wrong. I don't think it's the purview of the Pennsylvania State Senate to be determining who are elected people in the city, whether you agree with Larry Krasner or you do not. But I also find it quite odd, and this is saying this to a friend, that any Republican member of the legislature that has any complaints about gun violence in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania need to take the power that they have and do something about it. And again, as I just said, if you look at the statutes in New York and New York City and in California and compare them with Pennsylvania, you can buy sight unseen, no questions asked, any kind of weapon that you want in Pennsylvania. I think maybe a bazooka might be eliminated, but every other type of gun, you can walk into a store without background check, without anything, and buy any type of gun you want with high magazines, high capacity magazines. So as much as I'm friendly with Jake, as much as I admire him, I think he should try to help us the way he really could help us, and that's by getting some common sense gun legislation passed.
Thanks, Alicia. And unfortunately, we do have a hard stop today at 2, so that concludes today's briefing. Kiani, I see your hand is still raised. If you have follow-up questions, you can email our office at press@phila.gov. Thank you, everyone. We'll convene again in 2 weeks. Have a good day. Take care.